In December 1999, Capcom learned how to count to 3 and released Street Fighter 3. Now nearly 10 years later, they learned how to count to 4.
Street Fighter 4.
Yes, so it seems like we may have to wait another 10 years before we see Street Fighter 5, but in the meantime, this baby will do just fine.
KO!
Now you guys probably don't remember the original Street Fighter game released in 1987 in the arcades, but I'm pretty sure most of you, even the younger gamers, remember Street Fighter 2. Yeah, back in the early 90s, this game was going toe-to-toe with Mortal Kombat, battling for console and arcade supremacy. Between the first Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter 3, we got a lot of other titles to hold us over, from the EX series to the various Versus games to the dreaded Street Fighter the movie video game release. Yeah, this has to be like the worst Street Fighter game ever made. My favorite series, however, has to be the Alpha series. And even though I'm sure we're not going to see a Street Fighter 5 anytime soon, I'm looking forward to a Street Fighter Alpha 4. I mean, without question, Street Fighter Alpha 3 is the greatest Street Fighter game out there. And even though Street Fighter 3 wasn't that popular or well received, I did like it. Even playing it with a controller, as awkward as a Dreamcast, it was still a worthwhile title. Enough of the history lesson. Here we have Street Fighter 4, a game though not perfect and a bit overhyped in my opinion, is here to breathe new life into a somewhat withering genre. Here's our breakdown. First, let's talk graphics. Beautiful, totally amazing. That gritty, cel-shaded style is most welcomed. Now it is true that to really appreciate the graphics in Street Fighter 4, a gamer needs to play it on a high-def TV. But even on an old standard definition TV, it still looks good. And if you really want to see this monster in all its HD glory but don't have the TV at home, why not pass through the Area 51 game arcade and experience it firsthand? Now this game doesn't just look pretty from a distance. If you really get into it, examine it, dissect it, you'll see that Capcom has gone through great pains to ensure its fans an awesome looking game. The character animations are so fluid and lifelike, the facial expressions on the close-ups, the clothes blowing in the wind, and other physics like this guy's bouncing belly. Disturbing, but still a sight to behold.
You fought the rest, now try the best!
The backgrounds are also amazing. What really caught me though was Street Fighter's return to 2D. I mean, the nostalgia is overwhelming, yes, but other than that, I'm really impressed with the way Capcom took this baby back to the roots and was still able to come out with a 2D game that tops most of these other 3D fighters. Impressive. That's all I need to say.
This is going to be one hell of a show.
Let's move on to some more good stuff. Online, this is definitely necessary. Problem is, too much lag. This is a major killer in online fighting games. To be playing a glitchy fighting game can be a real thunderstorm on one's parade. But when there is no lag, it's good times. Just look out for your opponent's stability gauge before choosing to fight.
KO!
Another thing, while playing online, you don't have too many options, but this is Street Fighter. We don't need that many options to have a good time. Now, whether online or not, it doesn't matter. Versus in Street Fighter promises hours and hours of satisfaction. Once you're up against some competent players, you're guaranteed many hours of thumb-blistering non-stop gaming. Let's talk gameplay, the most interesting and important part of any game. Now Capcom certainly delivered here, but to be fair, gamers need to remember this is not Street Fighter EX or Alpha. It's based on the original Street Fighter. I don't know if much gamers watching even notice that there is a difference. I mean, since Capcom takes so long to spawn sequels, one might lose track. So my point is, the gameplay is based on a Street Fighter 1, 2, and 3 games. We do have some EX elements, but for the most part, it feels more like Street Fighter 2 and 3.
KO!
But here's some of the good stuff that we've got. We've got the revenge gauge, genius in its simplicity. The more you get hit, the quicker the gauge rises. You can use this revenge ability to deliver a powerful attack on your opponent. Sometimes it comes off as really cheap, especially when fighting Seth or when you're on the winning end and your opponent pulls one off successfully. This can easily change the tide. You also have your regular super combo and EX moves like I mentioned before, plus your focus attacks. These moves aren't the most complicated once you get used to the series, but it does add a certain level of depth and strategy to the game, and even though a button smasher can enjoy this game, the elitist Street Fighter gamers out there can hold their heads high knowing that with enough experience, a seasoned gamer can easily crush a newcomer or button smasher with relative ease by executing well thought out and practiced strategies. The addition of new characters is always welcomed, and even though the lineup isn't that large, the fighters that are available are satisfactory. Some a bit odd, but still, we can work with it.
It's super dynamic cooking time!
Capcom decided to go a bit deeper with the story of Street Fighter. Now when I say deeper, I don't mean the story is particularly deep. Actually, it's not deep at all. It's just that Capcom seemed to have put a bit more effort into the storytelling. Lucky for us and Capcom, nobody plays Street Fighter for its story. Street Fighter never had a good story behind it anyway. Personally, I always thought Ryu needed to get a life. All this guy does is roam the earth like Kane looking for a fight. Does he even take a bath? He's always wearing the same clothes, saying the same things. Come on, Ryu. Get a job, a girlfriend, a hobby, a pair of shoes. Even Ken has a life.
Did you get to see Ryu?
Yeah, but we had our hands full with the other fights.
A couple things I really don't like about Street Fighter 4. Small things, but I'll mention them anyway. First, no air blocking. This was in Street Fighter 3. Now I can live without parrying, but air blocking is very important. Then the loading times at the versus screen. Too long, and during extended play sessions this can be annoying. You know, it breaks momentum. Then the limited game modes. I don't need much, but Capcom could have thrown in a few more. And not that this is so important, because I see where Capcom was trying to keep this game relatively basic and true to its roots, but maybe a tag team mode would have been cool. Some might disagree, but there is a reason why Tekken Tag is still considered by many as the greatest Tekken game ever. And another thing that bites me about Street Fighter 4, I mentioned it before, the lineup. I would have really appreciated a bigger lineup. I mean, since we have to wait like 10 years for a sequel, why not put in more characters? As for the difficulty level, subjective as usual, but even on the hardest settings, it's still a breeze.
You win! Perfect!
In a nutshell, with great graphics, good but not groundbreaking gameplay, weak story and voice acting, no air blocks, a modest lineup, limited game modes, we have to judge Street Fighter 4 for what it is. An incredible fighting game that has made its return to prove to gamers and game developers that it was and still is the king. So despite a few bumps here and there, Street Fighter 4 is still an amazing fighter that takes gamers back to basics in a major way. The lab gives Street Fighter 4 a 9 out of 10.
You win!
Stay with us, gamers. After the break, we sit down with the blonde rat himself and go check out some paintball action.